Hi, I'm Femi OK.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in The Stream.
Today, anti-Semitism in the UK. Why are so many Labour politicians being accused of prejudice? There's so many occasions when we say we could not have made this show without you. Today is one of those occasions, Malika.
Literally, because the idea for today's show came from someone who watches us regularly and wanted to share something that's happening in the UK from his perspective.
As a pro-Palestinian activist, I've been concerned about anti-Semitism in the movement for some time, how we define it, who defines it, and how we recognize and identify it within the movement. I'm Gary Spedding, and I'm in The Stream.
So Gary started this conversation, and you can keep it going. Tweet us at #AJStream to share your own thoughts and questions.
An anti-Semitism scandal has dominated UK headlines for weeks. From university campuses to the House of Commons, Britain's opposition Labour Party has been criticised for harbouring anti-Jewish sentiment. Dozens of members, including a former mayor of London, have been suspended as the party examines the line between criticising Israeli policies and criticising Jewish people in general. So to talk about the climate in the UK right now, we have in London, Charlie Allen. He's a columnist for the Morning Star and a Jewish member of the Labour Party. Rachel Shabby is, hello there. Rachel Shabby is a journalist and author of Not the Enemy, Israel's Jews from Arab Lands. And Rabbi Herschel Gluck is chairman of the Arab Jewish Forum and founder of the Muslim Jewish Forum. Welcome all. Groupthink here. Anti-Semitism. Rachel, from your perspective, can you describe it? What is it? Do you know it when you see it? Know it when you feel it? What is it?
Anti-Semitism is an irrational hatred, animosity, persecution of someone who is Jewish because they're Jewish and for no other reason.
Do you want to add to that description, Charlie? Do you agree with that?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. But it does seem that the definition is being changed and expanded and moved along for political reasons. So I think that's part of the story.
What do you mean for political reasons? Either you're, as Rachel described, if you're being picked on, you're being alienated only because you're Jewish. What's politics got to do with that?
Sure. Because as I understand it, there's the concept is being introduced of the new anti-Semitism, which is very much to do with Israel and describing Israel as, the quotes, as a Jew among nations. And so the argument goes that if people criticize Israel for being a Jewish nation, then that in itself is anti-Semitism. And that's how they make the argument that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, which I think is a problem.
Go ahead, Rachel.
That's not the working definition, though. There are attempts to change the definition of anti-Semitism, but that's not what you're saying is not the working definition of anti-Semitism, as has been operational for some time.
I'm glad you brought up the working definition, because we actually got a little bit of clarification from one person's point of view online. This is Julia. She sent us a video comment on what her organization deems this term means. Have a listen.
International organizations and institutions generally provide definition of terms such as anti-Semitism, but it is true that it is very difficult to come up with a definition that it is universally agreed and accepted. Disputes constantly rage about what does or does not count as racism, Islamophobia, sexism, homophobia, and so on. And anti-Semitism is no different. We at the Media Diversity Institute believe its meaning has changed over time, from theological models to race-based models, and today it is strongly tied to Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
So we hear that changing definition there, but we wanted to get a little deeper dive into what this means personally for some people. So this is one experience from Amy. She says, hearing Jewish employees snickered at by bosses who don't know I'm Jewish, stereotyping us, big-nosed, frizzy-haired Shylock, she uses that word. Another tweet, she says, she was told by one employer that I would not make a good outside salesperson because, in quotes, you know, you're so obviously Jewish. And she said these circumstances have happened to her in the UK and in the US. Rabbi Gluck, when you hear experiences like this, can you relate to them?
Sadly, yes. There's an undercurrent of negativity towards Jews in certain circles. And I wouldn't say that one political party has a monopoly of this. This sadly transcends parties, ideologies, and can be found in many parts of society. And it's something which needs we need to think how we can deal with this issue. And I think education, helping people overcome their bias towards Jewish people. And I think that this is something which many thought had disappeared, but sadly it's still ongoing.
But I think that's the trouble with anti-Semitism, isn't it? Is that there's an assumption that, you know, we've dealt with it, whereas the reality is, like every other form of racism, it doesn't ever really go away. It just sort of percolates under the surface. And I think that, you know, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has presented us with a new challenge in that we need to find a way to have a conversation that is critical, but that doesn't veer into anti-Semitism. And I think that's where the problem has arisen over recent years, that there has been a sort of a sloppiness or a desensitization to what anti-Semitism means, so that people may not mean to, but have strayed into that territory.
See, Charlie, what I'm thinking right now is this is a conversation that's a global conversation. It resonates everywhere in the world. But I'm looking at quotes and comments and conflicts right now in the middle of the British Labour Party, which is are quite shocking. So let me tell you about a former Mayor of London. He's a very, very well-known Ken Livingstone, famous and infamous at the same time. He's going into the building to talk about an issue that is surrounding this whole are there anti-Semites in the Labour Party? I just want you to see, as he goes into the building, another member of Parliament. Have a listen to what he's yelling at him.
Disgusting racist, Livingstone. A disgusting racist. Rewriting history, you're a disgusting racist. You say it's not true? Yes, you're a lying racist. Really? Why don't you go and check your history? A Nazi apologist. A Nazi apologist. Check your history. A Nazi apologist. You're a disgusting Nazi apologist, Livingstone.
This is a major figure in the British Labour Party being yelled at, and you're a racist and a Nazi apologist. There's a bit more of the backstory which you can find out online. But Charlie, does the Labour Party have issues here?
Well, I think clearly from that clip there are some issues going on. What makes it even more disturbing, that particular episode, was that the Labour MP attacking Ken Livingstone actually chairs the all-party parliamentary group on anti-Semitism. So he has a special responsibility, to keep an eye on what's going on and to call out genuine examples of anti-Semitism, which makes it even more distressing that he would choose to attack Ken Livingstone, who his comments were controversial and inaccurate as well, but they weren't anti-Semitic. I mean, no one can explain why it's anti-Semitic, and calling him a disgusting Nazi apologist, I don't know where he gets that from, a Nazi apologist. And the MP, John Mann, knows full well that he's being filmed. There's one point when he actually looks at the camera and makes sure that it's still filming. And to be honest, I would say that, if anything, episodes like that and then the subsequent suspension of Ken Livingstone under the cloud of anti-Semitism and amid these Nazi apologist accusations, I would say that contributes more to anti-Semitism. That emboldens the anti-Semites. That they can use that to show, you see any criticism of Israel, bang, the Jewish lobby will come and get you.
Charlie,
the trouble with your analysis is that it is entirely one-sided, and it's precisely what I was saying in the beginning, which is that it is possible for the Labour Party, for there to be attempts to undermine the Labour Party leadership.
Rachel, may I just let me just play the comments that Ken Livingstone made. He was supporting a colleague who said something rather indelicate about Israel during the Gaza conflict, the most recent one, and he was trying to explain why it wasn't over the top. So this is Ken Livingstone on the BBC, April the 28th. So have a listen.
Let's remember, when Hitler won his election in 1932, his policy then was that Jews should be moved to Israel. He was supporting Zionism. His boy went mad and ended up killing 6 million Jews. But the simple fact in all of this is that Naz made these comments at a time when there's another brutal Israeli attack on the Palestinians.
And Rachel, of course, as you mentioned earlier, there was quite a backlash to Livingstone's comments. But there's someone here online, Avram, who takes issue with that. He says, I've been pretty sickened by UK Labour's capitulation in the face of often false allegations of anti-Semitism. And he goes on to say why he doesn't believe Livingstone's comments were anti-Semitic. That's his view there. But can you talk about this wider view he has that Labour is being picked on? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah.
Rachel first, and then you can go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I think that what's happened is that, you know, because it is clear that there has been attempts to undermine the current Labour leadership, both within his party and outside his party. There are people who don't want him to be leader. And so there are attempts to undermine his leadership, and the accusations of anti-Semitism are within that. It's clear that the Labour Party is no more anti-Semitic or less anti-Semitic than, you know, British society at large. You know, there's 9% of the British population is considered to hold anti-Semitic views. They aren't all within the Labour Party. But at the same time, while that it could be true, while that is true, it's also true that those Labour members have been making clearly offensive statements. I mean, it was absolutely devastating to watch Ken Livingstone say what he said and then refuse to apologise for it. I mean, this man has, as you say, an impeccable track record. He was one of the sort of pioneer politicians of fighting racism in all its forms in the 80s. And now we get to the stage where, you know, we're all just covering our eyes while he's speaking and saying, please stop going on about Hitler. You know, it was clearly offensive. And
So
actually,
Sorry.
Don't be sorry, Charlie. It's a conversation. Go ahead.
Okay, I agree that it was wrong, what he said. I mean, and technically wrong. Hitler, as far as we know, wasn't supporting Zionism at that point. So it seems that by the end
Hitler
of the 30s...
was never supporting Zionism.
No, giving it tactical support, not ideological support.
So Rachel and Charlie, do you know what I see? A rabbit hole, and you've disappeared down it. So Rabbi, jump in. What did you want to add?
Yes, I mean, I find this conversation rather disturbing. What Nasha said wasn't some not nice thing. It was deeply offensive. She actually said that the Jews in Israel should be transferred to the United States.
No, she
I
didn't.
find
That's
that
not what she said
totally.
That's not what she said at all.
But that is essentially what she said. I mean, I've met Nasha.
It's a stupid joke.
I've spoken on a panel with Nasha, and I do feel, based on my experience, that she has anti-Semitic attitudes, and I think that is deeply disturbing. Another thing I would like to clarify is that John Mann is not Jewish. He has his argument with Ken Livingstone. This is not a Zionist or otherwise argument. This is between
let me broaden this out, because I don't
MPs.
think this conversation is about what one man said to support another MP. It is a bigger conversation than that. So let's take the bigger conversation. If somebody... Thank you, Rabbi. If somebody decides that they don't like Israel's policies, are they being anti-Semitic? If they're criticising Israel or the Israeli administration right now, is that anti-Semitism?
If it is measured and legitimate, that's not anti-Semitism. But if it isn't, then it might be.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think what's happening is that, you know, there are many attempts to shut down criticism, legitimate criticism of Israel by claiming it to be anti-Semitic, which massively devalues the term anti-Semitism and so is spectacularly unhelpful. But partly as a result of that, people kind of as a knee-jerk kind of completely reject out of hand the idea that anything might be anti-Semitic. Now, yes, there are perfectly legitimate criticisms to be made of Israel, but there are ways to make it without coming over as offensive, singling out the Jewish people, or slipping into anti-Semitism. And I think that is where the progressive left is having so many problems, that they have become desensitized and
Rachel,
sloppy.
is this all of the progressive left? Is it a question of vernacular, or is it a question of ideology?
It's not the entire progressive left, obviously,
right.
but there are elements within that have become quite careless about this. And to me, if you're trying to build a progressive movement, then you do need to engage with this issue and take it seriously and try and formulate a way by which you can criticize Israel without ending up offending Jewish people, especially Jewish people who don't even live in Israel.
And the how to do that is what people are kind of debating online. So Jerusalem writes on Twitter, substantive criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitism. Israel purports to represent all Jews and acts as if criticism of Israel is an attack against Jews. That's appropriating, and it's an abuse of that term, anti-Semitism. But someone on the other side kind of debates that. He says, no, normal criticism of Israel needn't be anti-Semitic, but let me know if you've ever seen normal criticism of Israel. Charlie, he seems to say that's not a thing. It doesn't exist.
That's ridiculous. But look, we should be clear here. There are two separate issues we're talking about. One is criticism of the Israeli government and its treatment of Palestinians and the occupation and all of that. And there will be some people who say that's anti-Semitic, but as far as I understand, even people like the Israeli ambassador will accept that that's not necessarily anti-Semitic. But what a lot of people seem to say
it depends how it's done.
Right.
Yeah,
okay,
it does
sure.
depend how you say it.
You've got to be very sensitive. I mean, there's no question about it. Of course, you have to be sensitive, and you make generalizations. Like, for example, when Naz Shah said her stupid thing about, oh, the Jews are rallying, that did cross the line into anti-Semitism. And personally, I was offended because it made the assumption that all Jews were Zionists and all Zionists were Jews, which I think is offensive. So, you know, and any kind of broad generalization.
It's factually incorrect.
So, Charlie, is the offence subjective, or is there a line? It's like, what's the line that you cross between having an opinion and then being an anti-Semite?
Well,
where's the guideline?
Well, if you're kind of
if I'm offending you, I have a feeling that I could offend you and maybe not offend you, but offend Rachel. So what do you do?
Well, I agree. It's not black and white. But any time that you start generalizing and saying all Jews are like this or all whatever, and you see it all the time, not necessarily with Jews, but you see it with Muslims. I mean, there was an opinion poll the other day, what Muslims think. And just the whole narrative is very much like, everybody's very, you know, this is what Muslims think, this is what Jews think. And of course, that's ridiculous. And it just serves to divide and alienate our communities when we should be working towards the opposite, integrating our communities.
Rabbi, I want to throw something at you. Rabbi, I just want to throw something at you we got from Asa, who's listening to this conversation. And Asa says, all evidence shows that anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, is of a lower magnitude than in general UK population. And he links to an article there. Do you have specific examples of times that people have come to you and said, this happened to me, and believe it was an anti-Semitic attack? Or if your own examples?
Yeah, I mean, I sadly, quite often I witness anti-Semitism, blatant anti-Semitism. There was recently an incident in my neighborhood where some young white men in a white van threw gas canisters at a Jewish family, including children, and made anti-Semitic remarks, including Jews to the gas. And I think these type of unprovoked attacks happen far too often, and we need to think how best to change these attitudes that exist amongst too many people.
What would you suggest, Rabbi? I mean, this is a part of your really critical work that you do.
I think we need to discuss things with people. I remember once kicking a ball back to someone, and the person made an anti-Semitic remark. So I went up to him and I said to him, "Why did you make that remark?" She said, "Because all Jews hate me." So I put my hand on his shoulder and I said to him, "Do you think I hate you?" And I looked in his eyes and he said, "No." So I said, "Why do you think all Jews hate you?" And I think many people have these hang-ups about Jews, and we need to find a way how to be proactive in a wise manner to challenge and to engage with these people. I think with most of the people one can engage and find a constructive way forward.
A lot of people are told ridiculous things about Jews and other cultures, but it does seem to be that for whatever reason, whether it's a cultural side, a religious side, I don't know whether it's people from
Charlie,
other countries.
do you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking, it's 2016. What ridiculous things are they hearing right now?
I know that, but let's be honest, there are some communities in Britain that a lot of people would say they've never even met a Jew. They've never been in a Jewish person's house. They haven't got any Jewish friends. And, I've known cases of refugees, for example, being quite shocked, when we're discovering that someone's Jewish, and they're like, "Oh, I heard that Jews were like this, and I've heard of Jews like that." And it's like, no, don't be ridiculous. These are just silly fairy, the scare stories. And actually, I think the rabbi is exactly correct. When you have these conversations, when people meet each other and say, "Oh, you're Muslim. Oh, you're a Jew. Oh, you think this, do you think?" Oh, we actually believe very similar things, and we agree on a lot of things, and we're not these completely, stereotypical people, that we've been led to believe. And then I think that's how you challenge these prejudices and break down the barriers. And I agree with the rabbi that that's the way forward. But can I just say one thing about Labour again? Because I agree with that tweet or whoever they said that about there's less Labour. I mean, remember, Labour is an explicitly anti-racist party. There's an anti-racist whole agenda, and it runs through the Constitution. And of course, any case, and as the rabbi said, any single case of anti-Semitism and throwing these gas canisters, that's one too many. That's too many. But we should put it into perspective, especially as Islamophobia is a rising problem in this country, and it's being aided and abetted by the Tory party. I mean, this is what the media ignored pretty much. The recent mayor
Charlie, that's very sneaky blow in there to the Tory party. I take your point. We've had this conversation many times. I'm going to steer it back to what Malika and the community wants to talk about, which is what?
Well, Charlie mentioned putting this into perspective, so just want to add one more perspective to this. This is Sufia on Twitter. She says, legitimate criticism against Israel has degenerated into anti-Semitism. That happens. You can't deny it. But she does go on to say it has also been used, calling someone an anti-Semite, as a tool to silence people, take down a few vocal opponents, and scare everyone else into not taking the risk. Rachel, was there a risk in coming on to today's show?
There's always a risk coming onto an Al Jazeera show.
Oh!
No, I'm kidding. Look,
I know where you live, Rachel. Rachel Shabby.
Really? Do you? No, that's actually a really important series of tweets, because I think that really gets to the heart of the matter, which is that the two sides are kind of not really listening to each other. So on the one hand, you have people who are trying to shut down the legitimate criticism of Israel by claiming it to be anti-Semitic. And on the other side, you have people not hearing when there are legitimate claims of anti-Semitism because they think that people are trying to shut them down. So it's like they're locked, it's a headlock. Neither side is listening to each other. And the reality is that we do need to find better ways to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because the current way we are talking about it is causing offense to a whole variety of Jews who would define themselves as staunch supporters.
And Rabbi Gluck and also Charlie Allen, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Just before we started, the rabbi said, I would like there to be light and engagement on this conversation. Rabbi, hopefully we achieved it. We'll see you online at stream.aljazeera.com. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hello again, you're watching the Streams Post Show. We're talking about the blurry line between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism in the United Kingdom. And maybe it's not so blurry. This has been a really interesting conversation. Charlie and Rachel and Rabbi, I'm not in the UK right now. Has it been a useful exercise to have this conversation, or has it all just been about politics? And now that the mayor election's done, it's like, okay, moving on. I can't work out. Am I being too cynical?
No, you're exactly right. That's spot on.
Really?
They're going to move on. Honestly, we're talking about a dozen people, really, that have been suspended immediately. They've been accused and they've been suspended immediately. That's a dozen people, maybe 15 people, out of a party of almost 500,000 people, including supporters.
Yeah.
So these are tiny numbers. And of course, Ken Livingstone comes along and says something totally inflammatory, just when the whole thing was kind of dying down. Yeah. But really, we do need to put it in perspective in terms of the Labour Party. However, there is a bigger issue that there are some people who are definitely trying to turn anti-Zionism, but by saying anti-Zionism is automatically anti-Semitism. It's described recently, I think, by the Board of Deputies, saying that anti-Zionism is the new anti-Semitism. And I think that we, as Jews and as just thinking people, we have to say no. That's not right.
So let me just share this with you then. Yeah, you go first, Rachel, and I'll go second. Go ahead, Rachel. Sorry.
I was just going to say that is a terrible waste of an opportunity. I mean, yes, it may have been used to smear the Labour Party ahead of elections, but now we are having a conversation about the progressive left and anti-Semitism. So let's have it. If we let's try and find ways to have this conversation, because we are all living in the UK, and we don't want the conversation, the Israeli-Palestine conflict, to pollute our communities in the UK and disrupt our community cohesion in the UK. So in many ways, this is an opportunity to actually address a lot of these things: anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, figure it all out and try and find a language that we can talk to each other about these issues.
Yeah.
So
I agree completely, right?
You said let's have a conversation.
I think it's
Go ahead, Rabbi.
I think it's a misnomer to say progressive left. I think the correct terminology should be the regressive left and anti-Semitism. Because if you're progressive, then we look to the future, not to the past.
And I mean, this is the bit that I find problematic about the left wing, is that it is the left wing has been, listening, check your privilege, be aware of what minorities think, be aware of what racism looks like. And yet, when it comes to anti-Semitism, that, I quite often see a dismissiveness that I wouldn't necessarily see with other things that I would expect the left wing to be, as a progressive movement, aware of.
Rachel, I agree that there is a lot of anti-Semites who use anti-Zionism and the Palestinian cause as cover for their racism and their anti-Semitism.
But you're just deflecting now. Again, I'm talking about our movement. Let's talk about our movement, not the others.
Okay, well, our movement
they can sort out their own racism.
Socialists fighting against the fascists and the Cops in Cable Street. That's our movement. Yeah, the idea that Jews and the socialists are somehow got a blind spot. I agree that there's a lot of self-righteousness among the left, and that there are blind spots. And just because somebody becomes a bit left-wing and joins the Labour Party doesn't mean they're going to drop all their other prejudices. They could be a bit racist and a bit sexist, a bit homophobic, and there's an ongoing process, I think, that people will get, drop that, be less racist, be less homophobic, be less misogynistic, and I think that the Labour Party does have a role in saying, no, hold on a second, this is anti-Semitic. Maybe you don't know that, but let's explain why it is. Have an education. I definitely think the party can play there. But let's not pretend that we're a racist party or that Jeremy Corbyn's racist. I know that's not what you're saying, but that's what the headlines have been saying. Labour's Jewish problem, Corbyn's Jewish problem. That is complete, hysteria fabrication.
So Charlie, you are being heard. There's a fellow member of Labour here on Twitter, G. Murray Densmore. She says, great interview, Charlie. Delighted that you made clear our stance, UK Labour Party, on anti-Semitism. Agree with everything you said. Clearly, she's a fan. But I want to push on just a little bit in one direction. Rabbi, I'll give this to you because a candidate of the Labour Party recently was elected mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. He's made addressing anti-Semitism part of his policy that he's going to see forth. And our community is happy about that. This is Isam on Twitter. He says, this is positive. He should tackle this issue head on, as should any good mayor. No need to identify as being a Muslim mayor, though, because I guess his view is it's something that should be done by anyone. Rabbi, are you optimistic?
I'm optimistic. We are all citizens of one city, this great city of London. And I don't think we need badges to say that we, as human beings, want to support other fellow citizens of London. And I think Sadiq Khan is a Londoner, as I'm a Londoner. We were both born in this city, we both love this city, we both devoted to the city and its people. And I think that's the attitude that we need, not to draw back into tribalism, but to see us all as citizens, as Londoners, as people who work and are committed to the benefit of all people in this city.
Do you know, Rabbi?
It is significant that London has elected a Muslim mayor, I think, and that will be felt around the world. I know that today was Donald Trump versus Sadiq Khan. I mean, and after the offensive things that Donald Trump has said, and Sadiq himself has kind of sold himself as being the Muslim who'll take on the extremists. And it's true. There's no one cursing his election more than the extremists and terrorists and people like that.
Maybe he's at Goldsmith.
He's undermining the narrative of ISIS.
Yeah,
maybe.
I don't think he really wanted the job anyway.
Okay, I think on this note, I'm going to say wrap up with all of us, our Londoners. We're all Londoners, apart from Malika. What part of London shall we make her an honorary Londoner from? North or south of the river?
North of the river.
North, of course.
No,
I think she should get to choose.
I've only been once, Rachel, but thank you. I don't remember it.
I think I'm going to make her come from Tooting. All right, guess. We digress. Charlie and Rachel and Rabbi, it's been a pleasure having you on in this conversation. Thank you for actually putting some light and some engagement into this conversation. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Take care, everybody.